a really well articulated message to the stranger, letting them know you're being very intentional about expanding your network and you're looking to break into a new industry and or a new role, and that you'd love to just learn from them. It's absolutely incredible how many of my clients have success with this. In fact, it's really becoming my proven methodology that I share with all of my clients, regardless of industry. It's helped one of my clients that's a CIO, a woman that's transitioning out of practicing law for the past 25 years into private equity, design leaders. It's incredible how people on the other side, perfect strangers, have empathy for the person that wants to break into the new industry. I think on some basic human level, we all realize, oh my God, you've got to be so brave for trying that. And even just for reaching out to me, a perfect stranger, like, of course, I'll give you 15 minutes.
How do you get 10,000 people to take a step to the left? What's behind the relentless mindset of a world champion? Why do teams of exceptional talent fail? How do you manage the pressure to perform? These are just some of the curious questions we will attempt to answer as we bring you world leaders, curious minds, exceptional talent, successful CEOs, and incredible human beings who know how to inspire great leaders and are inspiring great leaders themselves. I'm Craig Johns, high performance leadership expert, international speaker, and CEO of Speakers Institute Corporate and World Sport Coach. This is the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong. Welcome to the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast. Our guest today is an executive leadership specialist, transformation advisor, and founder of Speciale Executive Leadership. Her work has included recruitment, talent, change, and transformation roles at Google, Bloomberg, Indeed, Fjord, McKinsey & Co., and Amazon. Our guest has a bachelor's degree in preclinical neuropsychopharmacology from Indiana University, Bloomington, master's degree in international business and international relations and diplomacy from Seton Hall University. I have the privilege of bringing you a passionate leader and supporter of leaders who loves to help executives articulate their impact and value to ensure a successful transition to their next executive position, enjoys innovation and design, and recently became a board member for the Women in Leadership program at Mercy University. Jennifer Speciale. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I hope I pronounced that last name right. We were practicing beforehand. It's Italian, right?
That's right. Technically Sicilian.
Sicilian.
In America, we just say special, but it's better Speciale.
And how do we say it in French?
In French, it's spécial.
I like that. You know, having options is always nice.
It makes you more of a camouflage when you go to other countries.
Yeah, beautiful. So did you grow up in Italy?
I grew up in America, but half of my dad's side of the family is from the Aeolian Islands.
Oh, wonderful. So tell me a little bit more about where specifically in America you grew up and what was the big dream when you were chasing your friends around the playground?
So I grew up in the Midwest, and the big dream was to get out of the Midwest, to basically be anywhere where everybody spoke a different language. I never understood why I was not a person of color and speaking English. For me, those things felt very foreign, which it sounds strange to some people, but I was always drawn to people from different countries and anybody speaking anything other than English. So usually those are my top criteria when traveling. I don't want to land somewhere where everybody just speaks English.
Oh, you're speaking my language. I love this, literally speaking my language. What languages do you speak?
So English, and then I studied Spanish, Italian, some French, Hindi in graduate school, And then I can speak bits and pieces of Turkish and some Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese.
Wow, look at you go. So that is really helpful when you're dealing with multinational teams, multicultural teams, where you have that ability. I think once you start learning different languages, you also start to appreciate the cultures even more, even better, because you kind of start to get the nuances through the language. Is that your experience?
Absolutely my experience. In fact, I feel like understanding even just a few words in another language is always useful because it's another way of connecting with people. If you have, you can have many things in common, but if you can say some things or know some things deep about their culture, it's just it's a unique way of connecting. And usually knowing something about the nuances of the culture and the differentiators can really create kind of a special bond with people. It's something I really seek.
Yeah, the whole cultural agility and intercultural competencies is so important now. Look, you've worked with some big global companies where it was always quite relevant because of them being multinational. But now with the world opened up so much, many people are dealing across borders, across countries. And so the ability to be able to build a connection with someone and understand people really makes a difference for the long term. That ability to be able to connect, build those relationships. For you, what are some of the things that you've always focused on in regards to when you're traveling or you're going to go live in a new country? If someone's going to do that for the first time, what are some key tips that you would share that would help them be able to integrate into the culture a lot faster, build those relationships and trust?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is to lead with empathy. It's something I talk a lot about in terms of businesses. We know from all of our design research that organizations that have more empathetic cultures, opportunities to fail and not be reprimanded for it, create more innovation. It's the same thing with humans and cultures and trying to adapt, assimilate, is just understanding what the other person's perspective is. Maybe they don't understand your accent or you don't understand theirs. For example, traveling through Italy, the accents and the dialects vary so much. I can understand anything from Florence south, but Florence north is difficult. It's just a different dialect and different kinds of slang, those kinds of things. So having empathy and patience and, of course, natural curiosity. I think curiosity and empathy are really on the same spectrum, but those are really, you can go with nothing else and you'll be successful.
Yeah, you touched on something earlier on too around you're wanting to actually go into places where people speak a different language and had different cultures, etc. My experience is that it tends to open up and turn on one of our senses that we generally don't use well enough when it comes to communicating with people, and that is observation. We do a lot of listening, we do a lot of talking, but we don't quite use those observation skills. But when you're in situations where you don't understand what they're saying, that part of communication really turns itself on. And is that something you've noticed as well?
Yeah, I think observation and empathy, they all go together. It's like we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. If you spend more time looking and listening and then speaking and contributing, it's usually a more reciprocal kind of exchange and a greater opportunity to learn. And anytime that you can learn more, I think you can give more. So I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, you always notice the best leaders in the world are ones that speak the least and not the most. And, if you kind of put it where you've got two eyes, two ears, you've also got the feeling and other senses. Realistically, you should only be talking 10% or less.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, for you, being in high school, were you more of a natural leader or a follower?
Well, I was voted for leadership kinds of things, but I think I ignored it and figured it was just flattery because I didn't feel like a natural leader. It wasn't until recent years that I realized and researched that leadership is something that can be learned and taught and practiced. I think it was, the common thought that leadership is something you're born with. I certainly thought that too, and did not think I was born with natural leadership skills. I might have been a little bossy and pushy. I definitely like to compete with people on the playground and things like that. High school, I didn't play formal sports, but I was always very competitive. I think leadership is something that it can occur naturally, but I think it's definitely something that can be read and studied and cultivated.
Yeah, good. And if you think back to when you were, people were putting you forward or voting you into leadership roles, what characteristics or what do you think attracted them to do that? And there must have been something there that people notice. And, quite often we see this a lot where people probably don't consider themselves as a natural leader, but for everyone else, they're kind of an attraction. There's something about them that kind of stands out and they go, hey, you know what? We look to this person. We want to follow this person. Do you, reflecting now, do you have a bit of an idea what that might have been?
Well, it's definitely humbling to talk about those kinds of things. Like you said, it's not something that comes naturally to think of yourself as a natural leader. But feedback that I've gotten over the years is that I have a tendency to make people feel really comfortable. And for that, I feel I can only feel really happy that I get that feedback because it is something that's really important to me. It's something I sort of instinctively care a lot about. I want people to feel disarmed and comfortable and free to really express themselves. It's something I would invest time in with my interviews and even with new clients. I want them to think deeply about themselves and share openly and authentically about who they are, because I think that's how you can really bring out the best in people. And maybe that's a leadership quality.
I love that. And, that around empathy, etc. I mean, people always ask me, what was your number one role as a high performance coach and also as CEO or C-suite level? And I said, well, it's very simple. I said more than 50% of my role in either of those cases is always care.
Well,
and so that came through then where you're talking about, that people, that you showed care, that you were there for other people, and people, like, care will take you a long way. Empathy takes you a lot further than what you realize. And so for those who are maybe kind of on the fence a little bit around, do I do a bit more empathy? Do I show more care? How vulnerable can I get? Like, it'll open up a whole new world for you in my perspective. And so I love that fact that people were noticing that. It's beautiful.
I completely agree. And I think even when I've had some clients who have had trouble connecting with people on their team, or there's somebody that's struggling or having difficulty, and my client is struggling to get their performance to increase, I turn that around and say, you've got to find a way to really get inside their mind and realize they don't want to struggle. They don't want to perform badly. They want to do well. So if you can empathize and mitigate your own frustration and see it for what it is, which is a frustrating situation for everybody, the only way to turn it around is by making it a safer environment and letting them feel that you genuinely want them to succeed. And that's the only way to kind of calm the nerves, because all of the research shows that anxiety can turn a person's brain off really fast, and that just inhibits everything, learning, progress, anything.
Now, the word psychological safety has been a term that is used a lot more now, and the ability to build permission and psychological safety in teams and environments, in conversations, is really, really important. If someone's coming to you and a leader or someone you're working with and is like, how do I build more psychological safety and permission in my team, my room? How do you approach that? What are some of the things that you can talk about with them? Because I see a lot of people who hear psychological safety and go, yeah, that's a great idea, but don't really know how to develop it. They might see what it is, but not sure how to actually create it.
Right. So the first thing is to know and really embrace the fact that safety or being empathetic, creating that kind of environment is not weakness. It does not mean you're creating a soft, wimpy environment where people don't really have to achieve goals. I think that's what people are naturally afraid of, that if they create an environment where people are able to express their real opinion, be creative, try different ideas, even if they're bad ideas, creating an environment where people are able to speak openly. That's a safe environment, an empathetic environment, that everybody's voice matters. And we see this a lot in diversity studies, whether diversity means a person of color or a woman. It's not uncommon that those people are marginalized in team environments. And so if they're in an environment that it's definitely known and felt to be safe, you'll have more people expressing their opinion. And that clearly means it's not just a wimpy environment or an environment where people don't have to achieve goals. It's actually an environment where innovation increases and you do have more robust decision making. So I think look at the research and even try some of those things out. You can take some small steps to foster that kind of environment and see how much more productive people are.
But it can start from just as simple as using people's names, finding commonalities, being able to, so it doesn't have to be vulnerability. It's more about, like, sometimes it's just about building that rapport and connection through, as I said, saying someone's name. The more you can say Jennifer, the more the hormones are going to come up inside of you. You're going to feel important. And so I think that's something that is really, really simple that leaders can use, that starts to build those environments. Then you have a bit more permission to go into vulnerability. I think you've got to build that connection first before you go deep. Is it something you see as well?
Yes, I totally agree. I think knowing everybody that's in the room with you or everybody that's on the team, sometimes even just being sure about what time zone people are on. I know I've been on teams where everybody's West Coast and they constantly forget I'm East Coast or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I know dealing around the world, you know, sometimes you're up in the middle of the night just to make a meeting happen, and it'd be nice if it was reciprocal sometimes too.
Really simple things.
Yeah, it is. Now, look, you talked about, wanting to go different places, languages, a real people person. When you left school and going into your first, starting your career, why did you choose the subjects at university? What attracted you to those subjects around, especially the first one around neuropsychopharmacology?
Yeah. So I always get a lot of questions about that. I started undergrad, and like a lot of people, wanted to find a way to help people and started in psychology. And as I got through some of the early coursework, I felt like it was very subjective with Freud or Carl Gustav Jung or Maslow, and you would base your practice or how you counseled people or advised people based on whatever theoretician you sided with. And I felt like that was so ridiculous and subjective and inexact. And I didn't think that that was an efficient way to try to help people at all. So everybody has a brain and neural activity can be measured. And so I started walking the halls of the neuroscience school and was lucky enough to happen upon the dean of the school. I didn't know that he was the dean. He just happened to be the friendliest and let me spend some time in his lab. And over time, I was able to work in the lab and study under some of the best neuropsychopharmacologists. And the lab that I spent the most amount of time in, they were working to find better drugs for schizophrenics. And so I was able to do some of that research. And then years later, after undergrad, when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I actually met a woman whose brother had schizophrenia, and he had just moved on to the drug that we were doing in the lab testing. And she said it was a lifesaver because the drug inhibited all of the schizophrenic tendencies, but allowed a person to still have a fairly normal and productive life. So that was really great to be part of that.
Yeah, fascinating. Now, when I think of those kind of labs, like I studied some medical and science things when I was at university, it makes me think a little bit like, were they mainly looking at ways to treat people that had challenging situations, or were they also looking at people that had brains that may function in inverted quote and commas in a way like normally? Would they also look at the neuropsycho side of things there as well?
So the lab that I was in, we really focused on people who were just trying to exist in a normal environment, just trying to be normally contributing members of society. And all of the drugs at that time for schizophrenics would not only inhibit schizophrenic tendencies, but basically inhibited everything. So you'd have a perfectly great person sitting in a chair and looking like they were frozen. They lost their motor ability. They lost the ability to speak in some cases. They couldn't walk or couldn't walk well, much less drive a car or perform a job. So those were some of the things we wanted to alleviate.
What a beautiful thing to allow people just to be free. Wow. Interesting. What a great way to, get a different perspective on human beings too, is to see it from a completely different side and understand what might be blocking or inhibiting people, what might allow them to be more receptive as well, which I really, really like. Now, obviously studying that, but then you've ended up working in some of the big tech companies around the world. What led you from there, where you're dealing with helping people be able to free their mind in a way, to then looking at, okay, now I'm working inside companies to even look at things like design and the way people think and interact and behave?
So, well, one of the reasons I did not pursue neuroscience is because I felt like it was too far on the opposite side of the spectrum. It wasn't close enough to the humans. I really still wanted to somehow impact lives of humans more directly and experience that. So one of the things that I loved working in startups and all of the companies that I worked for is recruiting and building those teams, and then seeing the people that I recruited running around the place and growing as leaders and, creating new products or building better teams, whatever, making better work for the clients, those kinds of things. So that was something that's always been really rewarding.
When you think about recruitment, quite often people just think about, we're recruiting, here's the job description, we're recruiting for that job description. But it's far more complex than that, because you're recruiting for, will they be able to integrate into the culture of an organization? How well might they fit inside the team that they're either leading or a part of? And how does all that connect together? Then plus, can they do the technical things, or is that irrelevant sometimes? Like sometimes we just go, all right, we need to hire someone based on technical, and then we'll figure out how to get them fitting into the organization. Other times we go, let's make sure they fit in the organization, then we'll worry about the technical expertise. So in those roles of recruiting, what are some of the key things that you were looking for, or sort of on a macro level aware of, to ensure that you're positioning people in the right place?
There are so many things that are important. I mean, there were a number of candidates over the years that maybe had the perfect skills and black and white, looked like the perfect hire for a certain role. But then you'd speak to them and know that they just would not be happy in that role. Maybe they didn't like the idea of traveling, or they were too introverted and didn't want to meet the demands that were required of that leadership role to really get out there and do all the things necessary for that role. Or maybe the culture was very, very demanding and, a feedback culture where you're constantly learning positive or negative feedback and constantly having to fine tune your skills. Not everybody's up for that. Not everybody has that kind of energy and, sort of thick skin. So there were lots of things. The hiring manager in particular, a candidate needed to be able to work well with a certain kind of personality. And one of the things I loved about some of the companies I worked for, the interview questions were very prescribed and in some ways could seem too prescribed or sort of canned, but they were very, very precisely designed to mitigate bias so that leaders didn't just hire in their likeness and only hire people that looked like them and had the same kind of experience, but to hire more diversely than they maybe would have naturally. So there are so many things in building a team and building an organization, and you have to really understand the mission of the company, the mission of the hiring leaders, and sew all of those together. Sometimes the person doesn't look like a fit at all in black and white. Sometimes that's the best hire. The rhombus, not the square peg for the square hole, but the rhombus is the better hire. Those were usually some of my most favorite hires, convincing people you've got to give this person a chance, and based on X, Y, and Z skills that they have and experience and things that they've done, they really are the better fit, even if they're lacking some of the sort of hardcore skills.
You talked about bias there, and even if we try and remove as much as possible, there's still going to be a level of bias in regards to our decision making. But you talked about the types of questioning there that were designed in a way to try and mitigate bias or remove bias as much as possible. What do those types of questions look like? Are they, is there a specific formula to them, or is there a specific design in how they're put together?
Yeah, very specifically asking behavioral-based questions. So asking a person to tell you about a time that they experienced X, or a time that they led an employee through a difficult transition, or helped somebody to get back on track when they weren't performing well. Never this question about, tell me about yourself. I feel like this is such a terrible question because it could mean anything. Some leaders want to know how you spend your free time, and they feel like that's very important to them. But that can be very biasing. Maybe that candidate loves to play football, but the team, or, watch football or whatever, and the team that they follow is the opposite team of that hiring manager, or whatever it is. That's like a simple example, but there's so much opportunity for bias in that. So such a broad question doesn't really necessarily set people up for success. They want to talk about their professional skills and abilities and interests and things that they can contribute. They want to showcase those things. And so the more specific a question, the better. And it really can get to the heart of a person's ability. And based on their ability is based on how well they will fit in the organization.
Yeah, I like that key there about being specific with the questions and not have these big abstract questions that can throw people or send them down different rabbit holes as well, which may miss the intention of what someone's asking, and then they're like, well, why didn't they answer the question? It's not the candidate's fault, it's yours, because you asked an abstract question.
And that happens. In shadowing interviews at one of the companies, when I first joined, their process is to shadow other candidates and hiring managers' interview processes. And I saw really brilliant candidates just not able to speak in the right way that company expects people to answer questions. And so I always liken that to, maybe you've studied Spanish your whole life and your instructors were from Mexico City, but you are now suddenly in Spain trying to speak Spanish. You will miss each other. You will have big communication gaps. And I saw this all the time. It's one of the reasons that I started my own business to coach people, to help people develop a almost an airtight method of communicating and storytelling about their skills and about their abilities, so that any person can understand what it is, whether it's a grandma or a CEO, a finance person, a designer, any person that needs to understand what the person's impact is. You've got to be able to relay that and relay it in sort of black and white terms.
As we move forward the next 10 years, even more, there's lots of talk at the moment that people's current roles are going to change. They're going to look very, very different in the next 10 years. Also, and for some people, there's a bit of a fear that they're going to lose their job, may be taken over by a computer or a robot or a piece of software. When people are looking to the future, what are some of the things that you see that we should be considering? Because it's easy to get complacent in the role we have and go, I'm really good at what I'm doing. I'm going to be irreplaceable. But what are some of the things that you see are going to be important in the way we think about our roles and our contribution, the value we can bring to companies?
I honestly think staying as close as possible to what your real passions are, and then always staying on top of how you want to contribute to those. So if you have a real passion for X and you're afraid that it'll be replaced by AI, we'll take design, for example. If you're fearful that now we can do wireframing with AI and you'll be replaced by that, figure out how AI can help designers. I know that there are chief design officers that are working with AI now to do more with less, because hiring certain teams, a lot of companies overhired during COVID, and now there's this sort of lots of downsizing. And so find ways to stay true to what you want to do and what you love, but find ways to work with those things that you're afraid of and make them your friend and make it productive, make it work for you. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really important approach. I just coming back to a bit of a thought, quite often, people want to be able to, people always love to be able to earn a bit more money. And there's, you can lead a little bit better lifestyle, enjoy a bit of life, a bit more comfort, less stress when the interest rates go up or inflation rises. But the kind of traditional model is that to really be able to go to that next level, unless you work in sales and you've built a really good sales commission type model, as an individual contributor, the only way is to move into a people managing role, into a leadership type role. Are you seeing companies out there that are positioning great individual contributors who are literally at the equivalent of what maybe a CEO or C-suite level person would be earning?
That's such a good question. I thought you were going to ask if there were companies that have the two career trajectories that allow people to advance their career without leading teams. And that answer is yes. I do see a lot of progress in that regard, because not everybody is a strong leader, but they still deserve and should move up in their career, even though they're more of an IC. Moving into that sort of C-suite, that's probably really difficult. I can't think of an example of seeing that, primarily because at the C-suite level, you have to lead and manage teams. I don't know how that could be. Of course, I know of one instance where a woman that I worked with was a brilliant leader. She was never comfortable as a leader and did request to move into a senior level role where she only focused on innovation. And so she had that opportunity, but she'd spent a lot of years at the organization and a lot of years leading teams. I'm certain because of that, she had the compensation to match that. But it's been a year or two since I've heard from her, so I don't know how things are going. I don't know if that was sustainable, but I think it's an amazing idea. If an organization could sustain that, it does make sense. Everybody's got different skills and unique characteristics and should still be able to contribute and not just fall by the wayside and stay at one level.
Yeah, because look, for me, I've always looked at it and gone, okay, what does someone's value bring to an organization? You know, might have someone who's great at managing people, but has never been that great at being in that type of company, being the person who's a good individual contributor. But as a people leader, they're amazing. And so, you know, they've got a great trajectory if they want to go right through to a C-suite level or CEO level, where the remuneration is by far in many companies greater than what you can as an individual contributor. But I think of it this way and go, what is the value that this person creates for this organization? Now, if they can create amazing value by just being an individual contributor, why should they not get remunerated as well as someone who's a really good people leader? So I like to challenge people to think a little bit differently around this, because yes, you might be leading a number of people who might be doing great things, but overall, what is the value you're creating for that company? And if you can do that individually and you're really, really good at it, why not remunerate them as well as you would someone who's leading people?
Absolutely. And I would say make sure you keep track of your successes so that you can articulate all of that. The proof is always in the numbers and the impact that you can really articulate. So I think there's a great case to be made for that.
Yeah. If I was the person that designed the Apple computer, and you actually built it, then I would want to be remunerated pretty damn well. Maybe a lot
definitely.
more than the CEO.
Absolutely.
Now, you've moved more towards kind of the coaching space in recent years and really looking at people as they transition a lot into different roles, or transition maybe even, I'm not sure if you're dealing with people who are transitioning out of their careers, but what are some of the obstacles or the barriers that you notice that are quite common that people put in front of them when they are shifting into or transitioning into new roles?
There can be so many. Some common patterns are, where do I start? You know, it's very difficult to just sort of know that you want something different, and maybe you even have it really well defined, but you just don't know where to start. I'm a huge proponent of reaching out to complete strangers on LinkedIn and scheduling 15-minute coffee chats. A really well articulated message to the stranger, letting them know you're being very intentional about expanding your network, and you're looking to break into a new industry and or a new role, and that you'd love to just learn from them. It's absolutely incredible how many of my clients have success with this. In fact, it's really becoming my proven methodology that I share with all of my clients, regardless of industry. It's helped one of my clients that's a CIO, a woman that's transitioning out of practicing law for the past 25 years into private equity, design leaders. It's incredible how people on the other side, perfect strangers, have empathy for the person that wants to break into the new industry. I think on some basic human level, we all realize, oh my God, you've got to be so brave for trying that. And even just for reaching out to me, a perfect stranger, like, of course, I'll give you 15 minutes. And it's even flattering. The person's keen to hear those kinds. And I think at the end of the day, it's nice to feel recognized from a stranger, particularly if you don't frame your message like, look, I'm trying to get something from you and I need you to give me something. If the message is clear, I'd like to learn from you, and that is your objective, I think only good things come from that. And I've seen it happen. It's really incredible.
It's like a modern version of the adult, I've forgotten the word, internship. It's like an adult internship. And, you know, I'm a massive component. Actually, I just had someone reach out yesterday and wanting to do some internship. And in the company we currently have, we haven't done internships yet. Whereas a lot of my other companies, I've made sure we've internships. I've built relationships with universities and things like that. It's really important, because when I was young, in going through university, there was none. And I had to create my own. And I was and I think it was a huge career accelerator where I'd literally go, who are the best in this area of coaching and sport? Who is the best in high performance sport and sports science? And even beyond that, I'd even go, who is amazing in leadership that I like? And I would reach out and arrange conversations, have coffees, etc. And it's really, really, really powerful.
And people would meet with you. People wanted to meet with you. You could have assumed you were just some dumb kid and that they would never speak to the likes of you or whatever. And it's so inspiring how receptive people are to that. It's as much a testament to you and your bravery and it is to theirs as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's interesting too how many of those have come back to me for kind of mentoring at some point in my career as well. So you might feel a bit awkward at the time, or some people may feel quite awkward. For me, it was just more like, I just want to have a conversation. I like these people. Or what do they do? I was just so curious. There was never any anxiety around it. It was purely around, I'm very curious. I want to learn. These people have done amazing things. What can I learn from them? And I think when you go in with an open mind, it makes a big difference. Sometimes I think, and as an adult though, we shut ourselves off a little bit because we're like, well, we start having thoughts around, shouldn't I already know this? Or what are they going to think? Oh, that I'm not competent enough because I'm having to ask questions. But in fact, people, as you say, are so willing to share their time. And I found this a lot during COVID, where I saw a lot of people reaching out in areas who were just like, this world that we're currently in is so foreign to me. What do I do? Whereas for me, I was already used to working online. I'd done it since I was 1998. I had worked in places where I spoke no English, like I spoke none of the language, and they didn't speak English. And so that ability to be in a space where I didn't need to be talking to people to be able to function, and so I really love that ability, and it's opened up. I've seen so much more happening. So I love that you're encouraging people to reach out on LinkedIn. I always find that a little interesting one, because you get a lot of people go, can I have 15 minutes of your time to sell you something that you may not even heard of and probably not even relevant to you? or I love the one around, because it's part of what I do in my life. I train people to be professional keynote speakers as well. And you get people who reach out and go, I see that you're a speaker. Would you love, to come and work with your team around upgrading their public speaking skills? And maybe we need that. I think that's great, but it's kind of like, do your homework a little bit first.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. And I agree with you that just that innate curiosity. Some people will say curiosity cannot be trained. I think it could be true, but it could not be true. You can make yourself be curious. I mean, there is a reason you're seeking something new. So if you're looking at a person's LinkedIn profile, what is it that's inspiring about them? Find one thing that's very unique about them, or something that's really intriguing to you, and lead with that. And I think that natural curiosity, and you could also say empathy, will lead you to have the sort of natural bravery, if you will, to just have a conversation with strangers. And when I frame it like that for my clients, these are my most introverted clients, start to feel a little bit brave. And I said, well, you're interested in this new industry, right? You're interested in this new field. Why? And what is it about their background that draws you in? Tell them that, because people want to hear that. It's not every day people are told that something about them is interesting to them. So it's nice to hear that, and you automatically start to build like a little relationship.
We often forget that what might seem really simple and easy to ourselves seems absolutely amazing and incredible to other people. You're just used to doing something. So I think that is, really powerful to be able to share what you see in someone when you're reaching out to them. And it can't be just, can I have 15 minutes of your time? I just want to pick your brain. It's got to be a bit more than that. You need to touch on what is unique, what is special, why are you seeking to spend time with that person? And then you're more likely to get that connection, is what I've observed.
That's what I always did with candidates, especially the hardest to recruit candidates. I would find something that was really esoteric in their background that maybe was not commonly focused upon or evaluated or asked about. I had a candidate years ago that had, I don't think a certification, but had some kind of training as a spelunker. a cave diver, and I lived for some years in Louisville, Kentucky. And Kentucky is just a series of caves. It's like just a thin layer of rock with all different caves underneath. So every school trip, every field trip, everything, we were always studying about caves. So I loved spelunking myself. So that was something I asked about him right away. And, in all of his all of the recruiters that badgered him to come consider their company or whatever, nobody had asked about that. So that was fun. Makes it more interesting.
I like that. Very, very good. Now, in your roles, whether you've been a team leader, whether you are working in recruitment or you're coaching, people through transition, yes, there's the unknowns, but quite often the biggest barriers is the internal voice, the inner voice, the inner dialogue that's going on inside people's brains. Now, what are some of the things that you see commonly that show up that maybe someone who's currently looking to transition or looking at a new role, etc., is they may even be going through, but they're not aware everyone else is going through. So what are some of those things that you see? We'll start with that first, and then we'll look at maybe how we approach those afterwards.
It's incredible how many people suffer from imposter syndrome. I've even written about it recently, and I wrote about it a little bit on LinkedIn, and I was so surprised at how many people reacted to that on LinkedIn, but then even more surprised by how many people reached out to me privately. And it makes me sad. I feel like I don't want people to feel that and experience that. Of course, I've experienced it myself. It's a terrible feeling, and it's something you can exercise to recover from or to work around, to try and ignore. But it's really common, and some of my most impressive clients, in fact, really confess to suffering from imposter syndrome and feeling like maybe they don't belong in the boardroom, or they don't belong doing something in their function, or they're afraid of being found out, or people really understanding who they are, their weaknesses. And I wish that would just go away.
Yeah, and it's, sometimes people get a bit confused around imposter thoughts, which might be a one-off, versus more of an imposter syndrome, which is repeated behavior, or like repeated episodes of the same thing happen. But it's a normal thing. Like, for me, when I look at imposter syndrome, a lot of people look at it as a bit of a negative. And yes, it can hold you back, but I look at it as a positive. And the reason I like to flip it into a positive is that it means that you are pushing yourself into new frontiers. You are trying new things. Of course, it makes human common sense that if you're going to do something you'd never done before, or going into an environment you'd never been in before that's unfamiliar, of course you should feel a little bit, you should feel a little bit uncomfortable. You maybe have different thoughts. That makes real sense. Why? Because you're not competent at it. You don't have experience in it yet. So there's a lot of unknowns. And so I think it's important that people just understand the tools of how to deal in those situations, rather than get so caught up about, this is, I shouldn't be here. This is the wrong place. What if they find out I'm a fraud? No, it's more about being in that curious state of knowing that you are actually doing something new. You're trying something out, and it's okay to feel those. It means you're human. It means you're normal.
I completely agree. And in fact, I try to tell my clients, and I've always told people, that it's an advantage. It's actually part of what makes you a better leader, because you have humility. You don't just assume you're perfect at everything you do and you can rock it.
So if we're finding, maybe as leaders, or we're finding as, like say you were coaches and that as well, and we're finding people getting really restricted, and they're being prevented by moving forward or being more open because of, whether it be imposter syndrome or something else that is holding, some sort of thought that is holding them back, or a belief that's holding them back from previous life. Do you try and approach that in your role, or should we bring in someone that's more specialist?
I definitely try to approach that. I think that it has the potential to affect many things. And so It's not my specialization, as a life coach per se or a therapist, but certainly we spend probably the majority of our time focused on work. And so I try to really get to the crux of anything and everything that is affecting a person's performance, and always have, even just as a recruiter, because I wanted them to perform well in difficult interview processes. And of course, I wanted their brain to be clear so that they could clearly evaluate if this was going to be the right role for them. And if they've got things that are holding them back in a substantial way, then I need to understand that. And in my role as an executive recruiter, I would need to understand that to understand if they would be the right hire. Now, as somebody that's trying to help them push through that, I want them to try to metabolize some of those things and work through it and really break it down. And I think that there are ways around everything. There are adaptations for everything, just like in sports. If you have to adapt something or change your form in order to accomplish the same goal, I think it's the same with our professional lives.
Yeah. Quite often we'll see someone who might be struggling, might look a little bit unmotivated, and many people go, oh, we need to motivate them. Well, not really. A lot of the time we need to figure out what's holding them back. What is that handbrake? And is it an internal handbrake, or maybe is an external handbrake? And that external handbrake could actually be you as the leader, could be you as the coach. And so it's about finding how do we release those handbrakes, because the motivation will generally be there, but there's something else that's hindering that to come through. And so we've got to be very, very careful, I find, and to be able to jump into conclusions around this person's not engaged, this person's not interested, this person doesn't like this. Well, maybe not. Maybe there is something else that needs to be released first for them to feel free to be able to actually do what's in front of them and feel that motivation really kick in.
It's so true. One of my favorite things I learned about at McKinsey was one of the values that's called obligation to dissent. And the idea is, if you're on a team at a client, your job is to evaluate absolutely every single possible solution and outcome. And then as you do that, you start to work on the solution for the client. Well, every person on the team, regardless of level, the most junior, the most senior, has an obligation to disagree. And if you don't express the fact that you disagree and why, then the idea is that you're betraying the client, you're betraying the firm. It's your obligation always to seek the best solution. And I think that's very empowering because, first of all, that's the best way to have the most robust decision making. Some person that's got a different point of view, maybe it's incorrect, maybe it's not fully informed, maybe it is right. And if a person is not in an environment that is constantly pushing that kind of attitude where you see it as an actual professional obligation to disagree, if you're not in that kind of environment, and in fact you do secretly disagree with the objectives or the goals or the way that the team is going to achieve the goals, and they're holding that in, you're automatically working with the brake on, like you said. And I've talked to people who have experienced this, and leaders that I've interviewed at Amazon that experienced that. They just couldn't get one person on their team to turn things in on time or reach certain deadlines or whatever it was. And when they took a minute and really went deep with this person, it wasn't that they weren't motivated or they were apathetic or lazy or whatever it was. It was that they had real objections to how things were going. And once they heard those objections, sometimes they could fine tune. The leader would learn from that person and actually learn a better way forward. Not always. Sometimes the person's objections were unfounded. And so the leader could take the opportunity to better articulate why their objections were unfounded. But just having that opportunity to hear those can release all of those breaks.
Yeah, I think the important message here for people is not to get caught up in just the busy of doing it, but it's the being able to sit back and take the time to make sure and check in with people to, figure out what can help them do their, live more effectively, but more as well as, being able to unlock them in those environments where it could be just something really, really simple that is holding them back from being able to contribute, to enjoy what they do, to take it to another level. So it's so important.
Definitely.
We all know smart people have great answers, but the most successful people ask great questions. I'm curious, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
I feel like I'm doing things for the first time almost every day these days, but most recently and most exciting, I led a workshop and presentation at a design university, Syracuse University Design School. And that was so energizing to spend 3 hours with these students, and they asked such smart questions. It gave me so much inspiration for future designers. And that was something that was really interesting. Developing 3 hours of content was a first time. Meeting with all the leaders of the school, it was really a rewarding experience.
The ability to give back and create an environment for people to learn and be curious. I love it. What is the one question that you would love to solve?
Oh, wow, there's so many questions. I think I would really love to solve not just wage inequality, but I would love gender equality and diversity equality. I think it might sound a little ambitious, but I wish that there were a lot more equality. It might sound crazy, but in countries that kind of push down, I actually learned from a friend of mine from New Zealand that there's this concept, or maybe it was Australia, tall poppy syndrome. You never want to be the tall poppy, and everybody wants to stay sort of level. Poppies grow at the same height. So maybe I could theorize that the idea of not wanting people to be a tall poppy and have everybody at the same level, maybe it has benevolent intentions. Not everybody wants to be an overachiever or stand out from the crowd, but I would love for everybody to have the opportunity for that, and that to be more systemic, not the reverse, where you have to be a tall poppy in order to have equal opportunity. Not everybody has the skills to be a tall poppy, but if everybody had the natural opportunity, I feel like there are so many systemic things that hold women back, whether it's income or opportunities to reach higher levels within companies or people with color. There's so many reports on it, and I'm sick of it. I wish that there were a way to really effectively move the needle. And in many ways, a lot of the work I'm doing now is focused on somehow trying to move the needle. And so I hope to do that. I think that if you tie it all to metrics and profitability and show that there is good reason for companies to make a more level playing field and hear all of the different kinds of opinions, that those companies tend to outperform their competitors. So that's my question.
I think
that's my big question. I would love to solve.
Nice. I like that. Maybe we need a COVID moment that rather than just moving the needle, we jump the needle to right the ship, so to speak, in that sense. Really good. I like it. For you, what is an inspiring great leader, and who is a great example of this for you?
There's so many. That's real hard. Who is? So I'm most inspired by some of the design leaders that I work with. They're not necessarily famous, and maybe that's part of why I find them so inspiring. They care so deeply about the people that they work with, the clients that they impact, the problems that they solve. I'm really inspired by a lot of those people. Some of the designs that make hospitals more pleasant for the patients, that make healing faster. Those designers are inspiring. Or designers that create more efficient systems for, Amazon workers in fulfillment centers where English is not their native language and they need handheld devices that are in their native language and it protects their safety, those kinds of things.
I love that. It's a great approach. This has been a fascinating conversation. How can people learn more about what you do, and what is the best way for people to connect with you?
So LinkedIn is a very easy and effective way of connecting with me. I also have a website, www.jenniferspeciale.com.
All right, we'll pop those links in the show notes. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, Jennifer. I've loved, we kind of kicked off the conversation talking about different languages and also around, maybe what attracted people to think of you as a leader, even though you probably felt uncomfortable or it wasn't maybe the space that you thought you were in at that point, to considering around how do we actually create great environments for people to work? How do we help people release the handbrake, so to speak, when they are going into new roles, they're transitioning, to considering about what's important in leading teams and helping people, and that ability to really reach out when we are going into uncharted territory, just to ask people to sit down and have that 15-minute coffee or that 15-minute chat over LinkedIn. I love what you're doing, and I really like the way that you think differently, that you open people's minds to get them to consider what's possible about their future or what's happening right now. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been a wonderful conversation, so Jennifer.
Thank you.
It's time for you to join the Inspiring Great Leaders movement by visiting craigjohns.com.au. Share this podcast on LinkedIn and be sure to hashtag Inspiring Great Leaders. We would love it if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Drop us a line with your feedback and questions, and connect with us on the Craig Johns LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram pages. Be sure to check out the next Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong.